Hogwarts, Grey Demon Lord's Rise in Wizarding World. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 46. Hagrid hurried to the door of Dumbledore's headmaster's office. Lemon Snow Cream. Rushing to the door of the office, Hagrid directly said the password, and the bronze beast statue glanced at Brother High and opened the door directly. And Dumbledore did not rest at this time. At this time he was lying on the side of the case, holding a pen in his hand, and was replying to the letter. Looking at Hagrid, who hurried in, there was still a panicked look on his face. Dumbledore put the pen down and asked, "What's wrong, Hagrid?" Hagrid quickly told what had just happened in the Forbidden Forest, and Dumbledore's face became serious. "Lead the way, Hagrid." The two quickly rushed towards the site of Alvin's battle just now. Coming to the place, looking at the charred black land, and the broken trees, Dumbledore frowned. "Is this where Gaunt fought with people just now?" "Yes, Professor." Dumbledore thought for a moment and pulled out a wand that was one section longer, slightly longer than the average wand aim at that field. "The old days are restored." The scene in the clearing over there quickly regressed, until Alvin appeared, and slowly stopped. It's just that the figure that appeared is very vague, and Alvin probably can't recognize it as himself when he comes here. This spell is a spell similar to time reversal, but the effect is not so against the sky, and it can only restore some spells used in the current scene according to the fluctuation of mana. And Dumbledore, who can restore a vague figure, is beyond the scope of this spell, and relies more on his own profound magical attainment. But when he saw that the black-robed man should have hit Alvin with 2 consecutive Avada life spells, Hagrid's face turned white, and even Dumbledore's face became more serious. After watching the passage of this battle, Dumbledore did not speak, but stood quietly in place. After a long time, he spoke. "I'm sorry, Hagrid, I can't tell exactly who this person is. It can only be determined that he is related to the mysterious man. You go back first, there are still some things to think about on my side." Hagrid trembled when he heard the mysterious man's name, then obeyed Dumbledore's orders and hurried away. And Dumbledore stood in place, thinking about the battle scene just now, quietly thinking, "Tom, I didn't expect you to end up like this." Mumbling to himself, he thought about Alvin's performance just now. He knew that Alvin was a genius, but mastering this combat transfiguration in the first grade, as well as the Phoenix Guardian God who could resist the death curse, these things many wizards could not do in a lifetime. Even the original Voldemort was much inferior in his first year. Although Alvin's usual performance is far from the title of the Dark Lord, however, once bitten by a snake, 100 years afraid of the well rope, this fragile wizarding world can no longer afford a third Dark Lord. Thinking of this, Dumbledore secretly decided to pay more attention to Alvin in the future. With a wave of his wand, several trees rose from the ground, and clumps of green grass appeared on the ground. Soon, the devastated ground was back to life. It's like nothing happened. After doing this, Dumbledore did not stop and turned around and returned to the castle. One night without words, Alvin slept beautifully and replenished his spirits. On the way to the Transfiguration classroom, Hermione stopped Hermione. "I heard you recovered a unicorn, can you show me around?" Alvin was a little surprised. How did it spread so quickly? "It was Harry who said you signed a contract with a unicorn, can you show me?" Blushing, Hermione sold Harry directly. "Okay, then before dinner this afternoon." Anyway, it wasn't a big deal, Alvin directly agreed. Remembering this, "I didn't have time to tell Cho, so I just went together in the afternoon." In the afternoon, Alvin, Cho, and Hermione walked side by side. The three of them walked towards the entrance of the Forbidden Forest, and they were silent on the way. A strange atmosphere spread among the three. Alvin almost wanted to go back to the morning when he strangled himself. Nothing to promise anything. "Do you have to be lazy to come along? Isn't this looking for guilt?" Alvin was not a fool. How could he not know what Hermione thought of him? It's just that he didn't think about how to deal with it, so he had been skillfully allocating his time to prevent Cho and Hermione from meeting. Well, now, because of their own brain pumps, they still met. This wave is Mars hitting the Earth. So in this strange atmosphere, the three of them came to the entrance of the Forbidden Forest. Alvin told Celestia early through the contract that he was going to see her, so when they arrived, a white shadow rushed over and instantly came to Alvin's side. "Woo." Celestia's happy voice sounded, gently arching Alvin. Feeling the attachment that Celestia teased, Alvin also smiled at the corners of his mouth and stroked her mane. And Cho and Hermione next to them had long been looking at it, watching the holy unicorn standing next to them. The two women couldn't care about the Cold War, and said in unison that they also wanted to touch the unicorn. Episode 47. Alvin saw the eyes of the two women and smiled in his heart. "I didn't expect a surprise. I hope to ease the relationship between the two through Celestia." Beckoned and let the two women step forward. "Celestia, they are my good friends, can you get to know each other?" Stroking Celestia's monogram, Alvin asked her opinion. The unicorn's horn also had the ability to distinguish good from evil, and she clearly sensed that the two women did not have any malice towards her, and nodded gently. A pair of big blue eyes looked at the two women, like clear lake water. Both women were cute and slowly stepped forward. Cho said in the softest tone, "Celestia, can I touch you?" After hesitating, the unicorn nodded. Then Cho was like a pilgrim girl, her face appeared excited, and she gently put her hand on the unicorn's back. I closed my eyes intoxicatedly and enjoyed. Hermione also looked at this scene with a dumbfounded look, very longing, but I was embarrassed to speak. At this time, Alvin saw her embarrassment and said encouragingly, "It's okay, Hermione, you can try it too." Hearing Alvin's words, Hermione also followed Autumn's appearance and stroked the unicorn. Later, the two also became acquainted with Celestia. The two of them played on the grass and a beast. For a time, the relationship between the two women also eased a lot. Alvin looked at this scene with satisfaction. Sure enough, Celestia was his lucky star, and he helped himself a lot today. As the sky gradually darkened, Cho and Hermione reluctantly said goodbye to the unicorn, and the three returned to the auditorium. 2 months have passed, the pace of the final exam is approaching, and Alvin's alchemy has hit a bottleneck. That night, Alvin lay in bed, his hands behind his head, staring at the ceiling with a frown. No, there is not enough space in the bedroom, and if there is any movement, it is easy to be discovered. Alvin frowned and thought, his alchemy experiment had reached its final stage. But there were 2 explosions before, and Alvin relied on excellent reflexes to suppress the movement immediately. But in the end, there is some insecurity. After thinking about it, Alvin didn't think of a good solution. Suddenly, a flash of light flashed in his mind. Yes, there is a room of demand. How did I forget such a treasure of feng shui? Alvin patted his head in annoyance. Without hesitation, he put a phantom spell on himself and came to the 8th floor. And then people are dumbfounded. He only remembered that the room was on the 8th floor, but he really didn't know where it was. But fortunately, he still remembers the entry conditions and can try slowly. Then he tried it out wall by wall. Finally, with another pair of tapestries on the opposite wall, he attacked. I need a room that allows me to experiment with alchemy. When he finished his last recitation in his mind, a door suddenly appeared on the smooth wall, and Alvin knew that this was the room of demand. Pushing open the door and entering, there was a long laboratory table in the middle of the empty room, and the table was full of some tools. Seeing this scene, Alvin also felt very amazing. The principle of this room is not clear, but it must contain some magic of dementoring and space replacement. Not thinking so much, Alvin opened the box where he had cast the traceless stretching charm and took out various materials and tools from it. Alvin is going to be some of his assistants in magical research, referred to as Tool Man. These tool people don't have to have strong abilities, as long as they can help him deal with some repetitive tasks. The problem that plagues Alvin now is the intelligent system of these tool people, who have refined the shell and prepared the energy system. But how to perfectly instill his knowledge into the core of processing is the biggest problem he is facing now. But fortunately, he already has some eyebrows. That is through the magic of the realm of Eden. After this magic spell is cast, each character is independent and will develop differently according to the memory and magic instilled by the caster. For example, Alvin created an LSP in his dream, and even if Alvin did not intervene, he would embark on the road of seeking resources every day. And Alvin modified the spell, transmitted some knowledge and memories, and then created characters in the realm of Eden. Then it is permanently solidified on the Tool Man. This becomes a manifestation of a kind of pseudo-artificial intelligence. Thinking of this, Alvin began his own experiment, constantly shaping his memory in the realm of Eden. It's a difficult process, even more difficult than creating a whole new spell. And what Alvin has to do is that even if he doesn't maintain the Garden of Eden, the specific memories he created can be preserved. It's been a long process, and Alvin only hopes to perfect the spell before this semester. Episode 48. The time is gradually approaching the final exam, and all the young wizards are nervously preparing for the exam. Hermione has had a somewhat unpleasant relationship with Alvin lately, and she thinks Alvin doesn't believe what she says. Snape is a bad guy. She claimed to have overheard a conversation in which Snape threatened Quirrell. This made her very sure that the guy who coveted the Philosopher's Stone was Snape. Alvin did not refute either, but said that the truth of the matter was far from being as simple as it seemed. This made Hermione a little dissatisfied with his covert behavior, pouting and indicating that she would ignore Alvin for a while until she caught Snape appearing. Alvin didn't think about this. Hermione was a stubborn girl, and only when she found out the truth herself would she realize her mistake. Alvin also wanted to make Hermione take her words seriously through this incident. Sometimes having a personality is a charm, but girls with 2 strong personalities are still not so pleasant. It was in this context that Alvin's first final exam arrived. There was nothing to say about the whole exam, and Alvin passed all the exams smoothly, especially in the defense against the dark arts exam. When Quirrell saw Alvin take out his wand, his whole body trembled. Speaking of Quirrell, Alvin also had to lament Voldemort's masterful methods. In the last situation, Quirrell was about to be beaten out of shape, but after a week of absence, Quirrell still appeared at Hogwarts, but his voice became very weak and deliberately avoiding Alvin every time. Alvin also does not debunk Quirrell. After all, it is up to him to get the Philosopher's Stone. In this way, Alvin's first grade life came to an end. After Alvin finished all the exams, he returned to the bedroom, ready to draw a wave of cards and improve his strength. Since the last Nicolane card, Alvin has saved another 20,000 gold coins. In order to be able to draw the diamond card, Alvin has been holding back without drawing the card. Today, he decided to give it a go and see how many good things could be drawn for 20,000 gold coins. When it was 10 o'clock in the evening, Alvin chose to draw cards. This most unfortunate time he divined was regarded by him as the golden time. After all, the troll-level divination talent knows everything. System, all 20,000 gold coins are drawn. Remember to have something good. After speaking, Alvin stopped speaking, staring at the card pool interface with his eyes deadly. The system also does not ink, and there is constantly a light flying out of the center of the meal. Finally, near the end, a colorful light obscures the brilliance of the other cards. Alvin's heart was a little calmer, so he came up with one. Finally, the draw is over, 5 gold cards, 1 diamond card remains. The other cards Alvin are all fused, and the material props and other items are included in the system space. Suppressing the excitement in his heart, without looking at the diamond card, Alvin first checked the 5 golden cards. 2 McGonagall, 1 Snape, 1 Nicomet. There is not much to say. Professor McGonagall opts for Transfiguration Charm Talent Enhancement and Snape chooses Potions. Nicomet chooses Alchemy. The last card surprised Alvin. Bloodline Awakening Elixir. Gold awakens the sleeping ancient bloodline in the body, and greatly increases the progress of awakening if the bloodline has awakened. Isn't that the one he got in his newbie pack? Alvin knew the power of this witch bloodline. Witch spirits are those first wizards to awaken their magical powers, and there was a group of talented people in the world at that time. They have powers that ordinary people don't have, and can cast all kinds of strange spells. This group of people was called witches by later wizards. Alvin deeply realized that his magic power increased much faster than ordinary people, and even without fusion cards, Alvin's current magic power would exceed that of ordinary adult wizards. Without hesitation, Alvin fused 5 gold cards, feeling the huge increase in the magic power in his body. Alvin was immersed in the feeling of rapid improvement in strength. It took a while for Alvin to barely control the magic in his body. It seems that it will take a while to get used to the magic in the body again. The increase in magic power this time is too huge, and Alvin can no longer control it perfectly. If he was asked to take the Charms class exam now, he was afraid that he would blow up the classroom with a single spell. This made him rejoice. Fortunately, he chose the card draw after the final exam. Finally, Alvin looked at the final diamond card. The surface of the card shattered. A gorgeous scabbard formed and floated in front of Alvin. The main body is azure blue, and the sides and tips of the scabbard are wrapped in gold, on which this intricate pattern is also engraved. The whole looks atmospheric and gorgeous. And when Alvin saw the synopsis of this scabbard, an ideal township for independence. Alias, Avalon. Introduction, a shocking treasure, made of the hometown of the goblins, the legendary land of eternal spring. Efficacy 1. After the holder grows to the age of 18, he will always maintain youth and immortality. Efficacy 2. Grants the holder great healing power and mana recovery speed. Efficacy 3. After encountering a crisis or act of release, an absolute space Avalon, any attack that cannot travel through space cannot touch the host, which can be called absolute defense. Took off. This wave definitely took off. At this time, Alvin's brain was blank. He never expected that his first diamond level card draw would draw a treasure of this level. It's just that the system pointed at Alvin's nose and said, "Cub. Wave me." This is another of the most famous defensive treasures in the anime world. With him, Alvin dares to gnaw on the big melon. Moreover, the system has also been intimately changed, and Alvin does not have to worry about stopping growth like a certain dumb hair king after fusion. He can grow to 18 years old, and then stay young forever. Wiping the indisputable tears from the corners of his mouth, Alvin integrated Avalon into his body. A warm feeling rose from the body, and his magic has become more active. He was approaching the level where he had held his wand before. Alvin felt it carefully and found that Avalon was still improving his body, and he felt that the cells in his body were full of vitality. If he keeps wearing it, his body will definitely exceed the limits of human beings, and maybe he can still cultivate demon martial arts. Episode 49. The next day, Alvin soaked directly in the room of demand. He made a wish and got a training room dedicated to contact magic. Inside, with various targets and anti-magic equipment, Alvin unleashed magic to his heart's content. He found that his mana recovery speed was 5 or 6 times faster, and his ability to cast silent spells and wandless spells was also enhanced. Now he can be called a walking spell battery. Finally, after a day of bombardment, Alvin can freely control his magic again. Alvin felt that his current strength had reached the professor level, and others did not dare to say that Snape could still deal with it. I looked at my properties panel, and sure enough, I had a huge improvement. Host, Alvin Gaunt. Age, 12 years old. Identity, first-year Hogwarts freshman. Bloodline, witch spirit, awakening, expected to fully awaken after the age of 18, with a pseudo-legendary magic scale. Mana scale, 554. Magic items, distant ideal hometown. Charms talent, 6, excellent. Defense against the dark arts, 7, Wizards of the Sky column. Transfiguration talent, 6, excellent. Potions talent, 7, Wizards of the Sky. Black magic, 9, Demon King descended. Spells, Fierce Fire Curse, Heart Drill Wrist Bone, Shadowless Blade. Only the 3 most skilled are listed. Gold, 300. Looking at his system panel, Alvin was very satisfied. It was only the first semester, and his strength had improved to this level. When Voldemort is resurrected, he can basically reach the pseudo-legendary level. Although the pseudo-legend and the professor level are only 1 level worse, but the gap between the 2 levels was even greater than the gap between muggles and professors. In nearly 100 years, only 3 people have reached this level. Walking out of the room of demand, I saw Hermione standing at the door of the principal's office and constantly talking to the stone statue. "Let me in. I'm looking for Professor Dumbledore about something very important." "Sorry, you can't enter without a password," the stone statue said expressionlessly, mercilessly rejecting Hermione. "Why are you here, Hermione?" Alvin was a little puzzled. "Alvin, why are you here?" Hermione seemed to see a savior, excitedly said to Alvin. "Someone broke into the 4th floor." It must be Snape. Harry, they are guarding the doorway, waiting for me to call Professor Dumbledore over. Hearing this, Alvin patted his head. How could he practice magic and forget such an important thing? Without hesitation, Alvin read the password to the bronze statue. Lemon snow cream. The stone statue hesitated, but it seemed to separate the left and right sides. Alvin strode in, followed by Hermione. Unfortunately, Professor Dumbledore is not here. Alvin spoke in a deep voice. Professor Dumbledore is not here. We are going to the 4th floor now. I am afraid, Harry, they will directly break in. Alvin vaguely remembers that in the original book, Harry just didn't wait for Dumbledore, and rushed in directly with his friends. At this time, Hermione, who had no masters, had to listen to Alvin's words, and the two quickly rushed to the abandoned classroom on the 4th floor. At this time, Harry and Ron were waiting anxiously at the door of the classroom. To be honest, Alvin was actually a little surprised when he saw that Harry didn't rush in. After all, the savior has always been a style reckless. It seems that today is quite calm. Harry, Professor Dumbledore is not in the office, and he will not be found for a while. Hearing this, Harry became even more anxious, and his heart was crossed. Go, let's go in together. Alvin, you are so powerful, we will definitely be able to stop Snape. Alvin didn't stop either, just in time to look at the level set by several other professors. Thus, Alvin's first copy of Hogwarts began. The configurations are, Salty Fish 1 shouting 666, Harry, Salted Fish number 2 Ron shouting 666, and an eye-catching lowly, Hermione, shouting 666. Well, at least in Alvin's eyes. Walking in the door, I saw the three-headed dog Luwe, still the same as before. Alvin directly turned a stool next to him into a harp and played a poor fork. The three-headed dog Luwe knelt directly. However, after Harry next to him waited, he always felt a little strange. Why did the words Harry Potter ride and fly suddenly appeared in his mind? Shaking his head, Harry quickly shook his unreliable thoughts out of his mind. Hermione next to him couldn't help but sigh that such a terrifying magical creature would be defeated by a single song. It's still such an ugly tune. Sure enough, Snape is a fool. He must have been bitten hard by Luwe last time. Ron on the side was also gloating. As long as Snape was unlucky, this silly kid could be happy for a whole semester. Well, don't think so much, useless. Are you guys ready? We're going to jump. Alvin walked to the trapdoor, pulled hard, and the door opened. Is it really okay? The three little ones stretched their heads over and looked down, then looked at each other. It's pitch black like a black hole, bottomless. Seeing that the three people were instigated, Alvin set an example, jumped lightly, and jumped down. Well, although he knows that there is a devil vine underneath, Alvin will not put his safety on his memory. A wind spell was cast in the air, and Alvin slowly fell to the ground. Soft plants down there. No problem. Jump off, you guys. Come on, Hermione, I'll catch you like I did last time, trust me. Alvin shouted at the top. Episode 50. Hermione blushed when she heard Alvin's words, but she didn't hesitate, took a deep breath, and jumped down. Alvin's arms took Hermione firmly in his arms, and he subconsciously flipped it. Then he said something that made Hermione instantly break her defense. How do you feel? A little heavier than last time? Hermione listened to the whole person frantically pounding on Alvin's chest. Even after Hermione was put down by Alvin, she twisted half a circle on his arm. Harry and Ron above were relieved to see that they were fine, and jumped down one by one. And then it's here. Ouch. 2-inch. Alvin, didn't you pick up Hermione? Why didn't you pick us up? Harry and Ron rubbed their butts and looked at Alvin with resentment. Although there are soft plants on the ground, but they still have some pain when they jump down from that height. Alvin looked at them both as if he were looking at them. Can you be the same as Hermione? Poof. This sentence was like a sharp arrow, hitting the hearts of the two people fiercely. He looked at Alvin and then at Hermione. After confirming the eyes, both of them are people who can't be provoked. Seeing the stupid looks of the two people, Alvin directly ignored them. How could Lori fall to the ground? Fluorescent flashing. The crowd unleashed a flash spell with their wands, illuminating the room. Hermione saw the plants on the ground and screamed, "Oh my god! This is the devil's net, they are not safe, we are going to use fire." Before he could finish his words, Alvin snapped his fingers. Resist the ring of fire. After that, a ring of flame appeared from under his feet, and then rapidly expanded. The devil's net seemed to have touched his grandfather, and instantly put away all the vines, so fast that the three little ones were stunned. Go, don't waste time here. Regardless of their consternation, Alvin walked in the direction where the devil's net had receded, where there was a wooden door. Harry looked at Alvin with envy, and he also wanted to be as dashing and handsome as Alvin. Snap your fingers, shout what's coming. Unfortunately, he didn't even know what spell Alvin used, let alone cast it without a wand. In fact, this is not a spell in itself, but a fine manipulation of the flame spell. The large number of blue and white cards that Alvin obtained in this draw has allowed him to apply some basic spells to the realm of supernatural perfection. Just now, Alvin just made up a name just to play handsome. Apparently this wave of loading was successful. Didn't you see that Hermione next to her was about to see little stars in her eyes? Walking into the wooden house, looking at the winged keys flying in the sky, everyone was dumbfounded. Harry saw the flying broom next to him and his eyes were delighted. There are brooms there. Only, before he finished speaking, Alvin pointed his finger to the ground, and a giant hand instantly appeared on the ground, swept towards the sky sharply, and directly grabbed most of the keys in Zhang Xian. Alvin snapped his fingers again, and his palm immediately turned into a cage, trapping these keys dead in the cage. Go look for the injured wing. If someone opened the door just now, then the wings of that key must be different from the others. After that, Alvin conjured up a chair and made it. The main thing is that Alvin can't stand it. Is the broom next to this serious? It's like going to an escape room and someone slapped a map in your face. Harry opened his mouth. Well, I still use it a little. At least I can still find the keys. Comforting himself, Harry went up with Ron to find the keys. Hermione, on the other hand, was left by Alvin, and the two shared a recliner, looking leisurely at Harry and Ron, looking for the key. When the two found a key with sky blue wings and inserted him into the eye on the stone wall, after a harsh and ugly sound, the stone door was opened. As soon as the door opened, the key was bounced away, and he was caught twice in a row, looking exhausted. The group walked through the stone door and into a dark hall. Suddenly, the room was brightly lit, showing a shocking scene in this room. In front of them was a huge chessboard. Harry, Ron, Hermione's faces turned pale, because the pieces on the board are so huge, more than twice as tall as they are. In front of them is Kuriko, and opposite is Shiroko. There is nothing on Baizi's face, and with this black and white chessboard, it looks particularly gloomy. There are obviously a few fewer sunspots, obviously allowing them to act as pawns, and if they win the opposite side, they can pass the level. Alvin's inner soul burned at this time. Do you dare to make the design of these levels more obvious? The previous level was a reflection of Harry's flying skills, and this level was clearly designed for Ron. Is this the Wizarding World's bespoke service? Professor McGonagall, why don't you get a flying board and let them play an exciting game of flying chess? Episode 51. Soon, Ron and Harry had been assigned a place on the board. Ron was very excited at this time. He felt as if this level was specially prepared for him. Well, actually, Ron, who had been pressed and couldn't raise his head, could finally show himself. But Ron's beautiful fantasy was immediately shattered by Alvin. Copy into a pair. Copy into a pair. Alvin said that although he can't play wizard chess, he is a wizard. As a wizard, of course, you have to learn to defeat magic with magic. After a few copy spells, suddenly there were several times more black chess pieces on the field. Alvin still felt that it was not enough, and put another shield on each black pawn. A few minutes later, everyone watched as each white piece was rounded up by 3 or 5 black pieces. They all fell into silence. Harry and Hermione looked at Alvin with adoration, indicating that they had learned. Ron, on the other hand, had a collapsed expression. The mouth muttered, "This is not wizard chess. It shouldn't be like this. The whole person is like being played badly." After the white chess pieces on the field were violently swept off the board by Alvin, the door located behind the white square immediately opened. As if I wanted to send these plague gods away quickly, I couldn't wait. A group of mermaids rushed in and came to bring the next level. As a result, the house was empty, smelled a bad smell in the air. Hermione analyzed, this should be Professor Quirrell's level, it should be the troll, but the trolls have been solved by Alvin. Harry and Ron nodded woodenly. Sure enough, they still didn't come in handy. Let's obediently make a salted fish that shouts 666. Then everyone went to the next room. Just after everyone entered the room, 2 flames of different colors rose, and the way to the future and the way were blocked. There is only one table in the middle, on which are placed 7 bottles of different shapes and a piece of parchment. Hermione stepped forward, picked up the parchment and looked at it. It seems to be a puzzle. We can try to solve it. Alvin naturally won't blow the little witch's face, since she has the heart to decrypt it. Let her try it. Hermione repeated it several times, walking around the row of potion bottles, and finally, she chose a black bottle. This one helps us pass through the flames and into the next room. Harry looked at the black pill bottle and saw that the amount inside was only enough for him to suffocate. He decided to drink the potion himself and break into the next level. I'll go in with you. I have a way to pass this flame, but only let me pass alone. Alvin spoke at this time. Of course, he had many ways to pass through this flame, or even extinguish it directly. But after all, he would have to face Voldemort in a while, and he didn't want to be distracted to protect Hermione. Of course, Harry is fine as the protagonist, and he needs to get the Philosopher's Stone. After Harry heard this, his heart was at ease, and with Alvin there, he also had some confidence. After pouring the potion, Harry resolutely walked into the flames in front of him, and there was a desolate feeling that would never return. Alvin was just about to keep up when Hermione suddenly rushed over and hugged him. Be sure to protect yourself. I'll go to Dumbledore. After a few seconds, Hermione reddened her eyes and let go of Alvin. Gently rubbing the little witch's hair, Alvin agreed gently. Don't worry, I'm strong. With that, he turned and walked towards the flames. As Alvin advanced, a flash of fire appeared from behind him. Oh! With a soft groan, a noble and gorgeous phoenix appeared behind Alvin exactly free. Alvin's footsteps did not stop, and under the background of the phoenix, the whole person became sacred and solemn, making Hermione and Ron, who were already stunned next to him, have reverence in their hearts. A golden flame burned around Fury, and then wrapped Alvin up. Then amazingly, the flames didn't hurt Alvin in the slightest. He passed through the flames in front of him so smoothly and disappeared in front of the two of them. How are you, Quirrell? Harry looked at the last person in the room in surprise. It's me. Quirrell's voice was very different from usual, with a hint of coldness and eeriness. I was just wondering if I'd meet you here, Potter, but I thought Snape was him. Harry obviously couldn't believe that Quirrell, who was usually only a promise, and was constantly forced by Snape. It turned out to be the one who really plotted against the Philosopher's Stone. Harry, I told you a long time ago, don't let prejudice affect your judgment. This is, Alvin, guarded by the Phoenix Flame, appeared in the room. Quirrell, we met again, you were really fateful last time in the Forbidden Forest. However, you can't run today. And you, Voldemort. Episode 52. It's you. Gaunt. Quirrell looked at Alvin in horror. He didn't expect that Harry was not the only one who finally entered the room. There is actually such a handsome stirring stick as Alvin. Obviously I drank the right potion to the limit of only one person. Oh, this man has a phoenix, that's fine. Stupid. Turn your head around. On Quirrell's body, another voice suddenly appeared, startling Harry. Yes, honorable master. Quirrell replied respectfully, then turned around and slowly untied his scarf, revealing a small and terrifying head. Harry was like being targeted by a terrifying monster, and he wanted to scream loudly, but he couldn't make a sound. Even Alvin next to him was disgusted. It wasn't the back of Quirrell's head, but a dead white face like chalk with two terrifying bright red eyeballs. Most importantly, he has no nostrils. Alvin had long known that Voldemort was on the back of Quirrell's head, but he didn't expect it to be 100 times uglier than in the movie. Harry Potter, look what I've become, that face said. I even need to borrow other people's bodies, but there are always people who are willing to let me into their hearts and minds. That face slowly turned to Alvin again. Alvin Gaunt, count it up. I'm still your elder. My mother, also from the Gaunt family. I know your talent. Submit to me. You will be my right-hand man. Alvin was amused to hear this. Bow you no, Voldemort, that's not a good thing to say. I'm an excellent student of Hogwarts who are intellectually and physically well-rounded. Voldemort thought that Alvin was afraid of Dumbledore and continued to speak. Don't worry, Duncando's old immortal. Boom. A bursting fireball blasted into Voldemort from in front of Alvin. Alvin was too lazy to listen to Voldemort's nonsense, and directly fired a fireball technique directly to paste his face. Voldemort did not expect that the little wizard in front of him was so unmartial, and he did not react for a while when he came to his senses. The fireball was about to hit him. In desperation, Voldemort could only evade the attack with a very embarrassing roll. Is this the Dark Lord? Alvin opened his mouth to mock mercilessly, but the thing in his hand was not slow at all, and his wand waved. The 3 spells were finished in a glyph like Voldemort. This time, Voldemort was not careless, and directly released 3 spells to accurately hit Alvin's 3 attacks. Do you really think I couldn't beat you in the Forbidden Forest last time? Voldemort opened his mouth to growl. He was just careless last time. He didn't expect this junior of his own to have such strong magic power can defeat his own Avadeso spell head-on. Harry, go to the Mirror of Eris and get the Philosopher's Stone, I'll deal with him. Alvin directly ignored Voldemort's roar and opened his mouth to command Harry. When Harry heard this, he hurried to the Eris magic mirror. Voldemort did not stand in the way. After all, his plan was also to obtain the Philosopher's Stone through Harry Potter. Divine Blade without a shadow. 2 invisible air blades, attacking towards Voldemort, were very hidden. With his keen senses, Voldemort dodged only one, but another attack hit him in the thigh. Ah! A scream came from Professor Quirrell's mouth from behind, probably because the body was not Voldemort's. He didn't feel anything. It's just bitter Quirrell, this tool man. Damn it! Voldemort summoned a black mist to repair the injuries on the body, although there was no pain, but it also affected the movement of the body. Voldemort felt that the Alvin in front of him was outrageous, and from the few encounters just now, Voldemort clearly felt that Alvin's spell was much more powerful, and it was released at will. Can't go on like this. Voldemort was secretly anxious. Maybe when Dumbledore would come. My servant, Quirrell, give me everything you have. After speaking, regardless of Quirrell's opposition, the black mist he summoned filled his body, and Quirrell let out a series of screams. Alvin frowned. Although Voldemort is not in his heyday now, there are indeed a lot of crooked ways. He had seen the introduction of this magic from the Forbidden Book area, directly suppressing the life force of the wizard, and bursting out far beyond the normal magic power in a short time, similar to the heavenly demon disintegration Dafa in fantasy novels. Sure enough, at the top of Voldemort's wand, wisps of fiery red flames appeared, and the demonic energy swirled and fell to the ground to expand wildly. A flame python was formed. The flame python snaked towards Alvin. At this time, fury above Alvin's head let out a long roar, with a golden phoenix flame, and greeted the fierce fire python. Episode 53. At this time, in this small room, 3 different pictures were presented. At this time, Harry was behind the Eris magic mirror, shivering, and Phoenix Fury was fighting with the fierce fire python, splashing flames from time to time, frightening Harry from daring to come forward. And finally, it was the confrontation between Alvin and Voldemort, and the spell between the 2 flew sideways, and from time to time, the collision of spells and spells blasted out a large pit on the ground. Thunderbolt explosion. Flexible to the right side, Alvin dodged a heart-piercing wrist bone, and his backhand was an explosive curse in return. I have to say that although he only got Avalon for 1 day, Alvin felt that his reaction and physical fitness had improved a lot. Whenever he faced an attacking spell, he was always able to dodge and fight back. If Alvin unfolded Avalon now, he could blast him to death under Voldemort's spell. But it is rare to have a qualified opponent, and Alvin does not want to directly crush the opponent. Just because you want to beat me. Alvin Gaunt. Voldemort also became angry at this time. A first-year freshman actually fought back and forth with him. How could he be the Dark Lord when it was spread out? 100 Ghosts Night Walk. Frantically extracting the life force in Quirrell's body, Voldemort unleashed a black magic that Alvin had never seen. Countless wronged spirits appeared from his back, and then turned into powerful ghosts and pounced on Alvin. Although I don't know what effect this magic is, it is extremely evil at first glance. Shouting God Guardian, Shadow of the Unicorn. Calling God Guard, Feng Xiang 9 days. Alvin cast 2 guardian charms in a row, summoned a unicorn and a phoenix, and went on a rampage, directly leaving these fierce ghosts without leaving behind the pieces of armor. This is a gain from Alvin's previous contract with Celestia. He discovers that his Patronus spell can summon 2 Patronus, and phoenixes and unicorns are magical creatures. In the original book, only Dumbledore's Patronus is also a phoenix, a magical creature. Everyone else is just ordinary little animals. Voldemort looked at that phoenix, his eyes erupted with raging anger. It was this phoenix that last time in the Forbidden Forest, he suffered such a big loss. Several shattering spells in succession hit the phoenix in the air, and Voldemort began to summon new fierce fire. The intense use of mana had caused Quirrell's body to collapse. Alvin was helpless when he saw this. The venue was too small, and Harry had to be burned alive. Mobilizing the active magic of his body, Alvin cast a powerful transfiguration, Stone Pier Dispatch. The ground shook wildly, as if something was about to break through the earth. Tall stone figures of armor emerged from the ground, armed with épée swords, like expeditionary crusaders returning from the Middle Ages. Stop here, Voldemort. Alvin hurriedly poured a bottle of medicine into his mouth, restoring some of the magic that was about to be exhausted. This Stone Pier is the most powerful transformation spell that Alvin currently masters. Use powerful transfiguration spells to transform into stone armor soldiers to fight for themselves. Voldemort did not dare to be careless when he saw this. Raise your wand. 10,000 bullets. The rubble under his feet floated into the air, hundreds of them, and they quickly transformed into arrowheads, rushing towards the stone statue at Voldemort's orders. Alvin also had to sigh that Voldemort was not only skilled in black magic, but also in the use of this ordinary spell. This combination of volleys and transfiguration is not something that anyone can master. Unfortunately, the defensive power of the Stone Pier is very amazing, and these stone arrows knock down the upper side of the Stone Pier and only cause minor damage to the surface. They remained steadfast towards Voldemort. Soon Voldemort was under siege, and he could only constantly attack the stone statue with a spell. At this moment, the unicorn Patronus found a gap, and the sharp horn above his head pierced straight into Voldemort's chest. The divine light shines on it. Voldemort just wanted to cast the armor curse. Silent. Alvin's precise silence spell interrupted his spell casting, and the unicorn Patronus successfully hit Voldemort. A large hole appeared in his chest. You damn it. Looking at Alvin with resentment, Voldemort at this time had no ability to resist, not to mention the bull-sized hole. Even Quirrell's life force has been extracted by him. Alvin also knew that this duel was over, and he was just about to finally solve the remnant of Voldemort. A black room suddenly appeared on Quirrell's body, and he quickly rushed out of the gate that was blasted out of a large hole by the spell. Wait for it. Alvin Gaunt. One day, I will return, then your flesh and blood, your soul, will all be my sacrifices. Alvin hit the black mist with several spells in a row, but to no avail. He could only watch as Voldemort slipped away. He was not at all panicked by Voldemort's threat to leave. Now Voldemort has been beaten by him to the point that he can't find north, let alone later. At this time, Harry, who was shivering behind the magic mirror, heard Voldemort's cruel words when he fled, and also knew that Alvin had won. Trembling and majestically came out from behind the magic mirror. All of a sudden, I saw this devastated house, and the fierce fire burning on the ground. Did you get the Philosopher's Stone? Harry, waking up the stunned Harry, Alvin asked. Got it, Harry subconsciously replied, but was still shocked by this tragic scene. Although the Forbidden Forest already knew that Alvin was strong last time, this time it brought him more shock. After all, the booming explosion just now, the still raging flames, and the tall stone statue all showed the strength of this Alvin. Just get it, and glance at the fierce fire on the ground with a flick of the wand. All curses are over. The fierce fire that is said to never be extinguished also gradually disappeared under Alvin's spell. Walking up to Harry, Alvin directly asked for the Philosopher's Stone. Harry also felt that Alvin's hands might be safer, and gave it to him without hesitation. Looking at the strangely shaped red stone in his hand, Alvin raised it in front of his eyes and looked at it. This is the Philosopher's Stone that claims to make people immortal? How do you feel that there are not many powerful magic fluctuations? Grasp the Philosopher's Stone and a hint of magic penetrates into it. Alvin's face changed. This Philosopher's Stone, is it fake? Episode 54. Alvin had the urge to blow up the school at this time. What's the matter? I fought with Voldemort with a lot of effort, and the Philosopher's Stone that I finally got was actually fake. Isn't Dumbledore a pitman? Just when Alvin spat on Dumbledore fiercely, a loud song comes to mind, as if it can calm people's hearts and bring endless courage. Accompanied by the song, Dumbledore and his Phoenix Fox appeared at the door. Alvin rolled his eyes. You're here in time, Dumbledore. Alvin. Hermione's hurried voice came, and Dumbledore, who pushed open the door, threw himself into Alvin's arms and cried. Looking at the little witch crying, although Alvin was not injured, he was still very moved. Softly comforting Hermione, indicating that she was safe. Voldemort is nothing more than a bitter. Hermione stubbornly raised her head and looked at Alvin. Promise me not to take such risks in the future. Looking at the serious appearance of the little witch, as well as the strong friendship in her eyes, the softness of Alvin's heart was touched fiercely. Leaning down, he gently hugged Hermione, conveying his feelings to her. Although Hermione was shy, she was also very cooperative. For a long time, lips parted, Alvin thought silently in his heart, it was not me scum, but Cupid, who helped him shoot arrows out of Luana's hurricane. After defending himself a little, Alvin quickly put aside his guilt for Cho. Dumbledore on the side did not bother, and watched the scene in front of him with a smile. Knowing that the two were separated, he only spoke. It's good to be young, and when I see you, I think of me when I was young. As he spoke, he actually recalled the past. Didn't you fight with Grindelwald when you were young? What a little witch thing. Alvin's heart was full of malice. Seeing that Alvin did not answer, Dumbledore was not embarrassed, glancing at the Philosopher's Stone in his hand. He then looked at Quirrell on the ground, stepped forward and checked on Quirrell's condition. Now Quirrell has become a dried corpse, and it is old and not the same. Dumbledore knew in his heart that this was Voldemort's magic. Looking around his surroundings, the intensity of the battle may have been far beyond his imagination. Hermione's eyes followed Dumbledore's actions. Alvin hurriedly covered the little witch's eyes. Don't let her see this disgusting scene. Ron and Harry next to him were miserable and had already begun to retch. Looking at the young wizards like this, Dumbledore also knew that this was not the place to talk. Okay, let's go to my office and talk. There are some things I need to ask Harry and Mr. Gaunt. In the headmaster's room, Hermione and Ron had left, leaving only Harry and Alvin sitting opposite Dumbledore. Would you like something to eat? Looking at the two young wizards in front of him, Dumbledore asked. Harry was a little restrained and didn't say anything, but Alvin was not polite. He had just come out of the room of necessity when he was pulled away by Hermione, and he had only eaten a little dessert for more than a day. The stomach has long been empty. Here's a roast chicken and another onion soup. Oh yes, give me another beef pie. Listening to what Alvin said, Dumbledore was a little silent. This kid really doesn't think of himself as an outsider. Still, he waved his wand and summoned something that Alvin had ordered. Looking at Alvin's large feast, Harry next to him silently swallowed his saliva. Seeing that Alvin ate so deliciously, he who was not very hungry also felt a little hungry. But it was too late. Dumbledore had already spoken. So Harry, can you tell me how you discovered Quirrell's plot? Immediately, Harry told what had happened, and he also said that he had misunderstood Snape as the one who was plotting against him. When Dumbledore heard this, he also explained to Harry the grudge between Snape and his father. At this time, Harry finally realized why Snape was targeting him like this. This wave is the payment of the debt of the father and the son. Still, he didn't think Snape was a good guy. In the end, Harry finished talking about today's events and scratched his head a little embarrassed. In fact, it was thanks to Alvin today that we were able to successfully protect the Philosopher's Stone. Harry said he was a salted fish who could only shout 666. Needless to say, Harry, it's already a qualified Gryffindor performance to have the courage to stop someone you're going to grab the Philosopher's Stone. Dumbledore praised. This is his favorite cub, how can he not encourage it? After hearing this, Harry was still a little embarrassed, but he was also very encouraged. After talking about Harry, Dumbledore looked at Alvin, who was still gobbling. The expression on his face paused. Why hasn't this kid finished eating yet? Harry, you go back first, I'll talk to Mr. Gaunt about the rest. Oh, okay. Harry nodded quickly, glanced at Alvin who was still eating, and walked out of the headmaster's room. Finally, Alvin finished eating and wiped his mouth with a conjured handkerchief. Dumbledore saw that Alvin had finished eating, his wand swept away, and the table was immediately cleaned up. Looks like you're eating well, Gaunt. Headmaster, your meal here is much better than ours. Alvin responded with a smile. Yes, as the headmaster, it's not too much for me to have a Pokemon who is good at cooking, right? After speaking, he also winked at Alvin mischievously, looking like an old urchin. Alvin could only say after listening to it, is this a privilege? Loved. After 2 jokes, the two finally got to the point. Mr. Gaunt, you did an excellent job today. Thank you for fighting off Voldemort to protect the Philosopher's Stone. So, can you return the Philosopher's Stone in your pocket to me? It's Nico's stuff after all. Episode 55, Philosopher's Stone? Alvin was a little puzzled. Isn't this Philosopher's Stone fake? How Dumbledore said the same as the truth. Professor, I just observed that although this stone has some magic fluctuations, but... Alvin didn't finish his words, but the meaning was obvious. But there's no magic that can turn stones into gold and make people immortal, right? Dumbledore said Alvin's unfinished words, but he didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked Alvin a rhetorical question. Mr. Gaunt, as the most outstanding student in Hogwarts in 50 years, no, even ever, what do you think is the essence of alchemy? Equivalent exchange. Alvin's answer, blurted out. Dumbledore nodded in agreement, and another question was asked. Then why do you think the Philosopher's Stone can make people immortal? Is the magic in the Philosopher's Stone endless? Hearing this, Alvin understood a little the opening of the temptation. You mean, this Philosopher's Stone is going to dry up? Yes, Nico has owned it for more than 600 years, and only the last bit of mana has been consumed. Dumbledore did not hide it and calmly told the truth of the matter. Alvin suddenly, no wonder Nico Lane gave this Philosopher's Stone to Dumbledore, and Dumbledore used him as an introduction to seduce Voldemort. It turns out that this is an expiring product. At this moment, Alvin felt a little sad for Voldemort, and casually released a news of the Philosopher's Stone, and he sent it upside down himself. It's people and ghosts who are showing, only Voldemort is beaten again. Alvin took out the Philosopher's Stone and placed him on the table, with a somewhat regretful expression. When Dumbledore saw this, he was a little worried and hesitant, but finally spoke. Mr. Gaunt, you are so young now, aging and death are too far away for you. Extraordinary wisdom is your greatest wealth. There is no need to pursue the power of the Philosopher's Stone so much. Alvin was stunned, knowing that Dumbledore had misunderstood him and did not hide it. Professor, I think you misunderstood. I don't long for the power of the Philosopher's Stone, but I want to study some ancient alchemy through the Philosopher's Stone. Dumbledore had some doubts about the authenticity of Alvin's words. Alvin didn't care either. Dumbledore was also a master of alchemy, and it just so happened that these questions could be asked to him. Immediately, Alvin threw some of his alchemical problems to Dumbledore. After Dumbledore and Alvin communicated, he confirmed in his heart that Alvin's alchemy had reached a certain level. There are even some aspects of Alvin's questions that inspire him. Sorry, Mr. Gaunt, I misunderstood you. Dumbledore apologized to Gaunt, not because his heart was quite uneasy. He knew that Alvin must have his own secrets, otherwise he would not have the strength he has now. A first-year student, he defeated Voldemort, potions taught Snape everything, and now he also studied alchemy so deeply. I dare not imagine that when Alvin grows up, he will definitely become another legend in the wizarding world if he goes astray. Alvin looked at Dumbledore's uncertain eyes. How could he not know what Dumbledore was worried about after watching all the movies and countless film reviews? Alvin decided to make things clear. With his current strength, although he can't fight Dumbledore, Dumbledore doesn't want to cause any harm to him who is Avalon. However, he also needs to show an attitude. After all, Cho and Hermione live here, and he doesn't want to mess with the old bee and have to drop out. Professor, I know your concerns and even some of your plans. As soon as the words came out, Dumbledore became serious. Alvin continued without any concern. I'm just an ordinary Ravenclaw student. Here I have my friends, my lovers. Believe me, I'm not the same as my relatives. If I can, I just want to spend 7 years at Hogwarts smoothly. Power, wealth is not important to me. After hearing this, Dumbledore was silent and did not speak for a long time. Alvin was not in a hurry, but looked at the two phoenixes in the air. Ever since Fawkes saw Fury, he was immediately captured. He kept hovering in front of Fury, showing off his beautiful feathers from time to time. Fury, on the other hand, ignored Fawkes's love and didn't look at him squarely. Take care of yourself and tidy up your own feathers. Seeing such a fox, Alvin couldn't stop complaining. What kind of phoenix is this licking dog that does not live and escape? Dumbledore thought for a long time and thoroughly figured it out. Alvin and Voldemort are not the same as Grindelwald. Although he was talented, he did not show ambition, and the young wizards hugged him because of his own charm. And, as someone who grew up in the Muggle world, he didn't develop a hatred for Muggles like Voldemort. He is also very willing to help the orphanage where he grew up. Most importantly, he has people who love deeply, well, although more than one. After thinking it through, Dumbledore no longer entangled and looked at Alvin with a smile. Forgive me for the crankiness of a bad old man. After all, I have already taught a bad student. Haha, Dumbledore erased the matter, and then quickly changed the subject. This time you help the school guard the Philosopher's Stone, and when the final semester ceremony comes, I will add the Ravenclaw points they deserve. What other reward do you want? After waiting for Dumbledore's words, Alvin's eyes lit up. He didn't care about the academy, but he was very interested in the extra rewards. Can the Elder Wand touch me? Episode 56. Bang! Watch as the door to the principal's office slowly closes. Alvin shook his head disapprovingly. Dumbledore is not kind. Obviously he let himself choose the reward. Why do you turn your face at the mention of the Elder Wand? But it was not a loss, and in the end, Old Dang promised to help Alvin contact Nicholas Flamel to see if he could let Alvin learn alchemy at Nicholas Flamel for a while. On the way back, Alvin also happened to meet Fred and George, and the sad faces of the two made Alvin want to laugh a little. What's wrong with you guys? Alvin asked the twins curiously. Nothing, some of our little inventions were discovered by Professor McGonagall. Fred sighed. Alvin's heart moved when he heard it. The twins in the movie seem to have developed a lot of prank products. I don't know what was found this time. Can you tell me about it? What a gizmo. Fred and George saw that Alvin was interested in their invention and came in a bit of spirit. George showed off and took out a pack of gum. This is quick-acting truancy candy that can leave a nosebleed for a while and will stop after about a few minutes, Fred added. Alvin took one, took it apart and looked at it, with a small spell attached to it that could make people bleed from the nose. But the power is not great, as Fred said. The average little wizard stays for a few minutes and stops. Then how did you get discovered by Professor McGonagall? It's not George yet. If he hadn't sold this to Angelina, we wouldn't have been found. You still say that Fred, is obviously because you sold it to Lee. No, it should be the problem of both of them, who let them all eat quick-acting truancy candy on the history of magic exam. Hearing this, Alvin understood. It seems that Lee and Angelina wanted to escape the history of magic exam through quick-acting truancy sugar, but unfortunately they were caught. After all, there is such a coincidence that the two people have nosebleeds together, and they are still on the exam. Looking at the noisy appearance of the two, Alvin is happy, which is also the charm of the twins. They can make people happy at any time. Forget it, let's not talk about this. Alvin, do you want to buy some of our quick-acting truancy candy? Fred and George quickly adjusted their mood and turned to sell their products. Okay, give me a little. Do you have anything else to do? The twins saw Alvin so cheerful, looked at each other. This is a big customer. A smile immediately appeared on his face and led Alvin to a classroom. As soon as he came in, Fred took out a bunch of round balls like a jugger. The outside is wrapped in colorful packaging. This is the last time you dealt with Filch Big? Alvin looked at the balls curiously and guessed what they were. That's right, Weasley carefully produced special dung eggs. Alvin nodded, but this thing did not match his painting style, and he did not plan to buy it. Are you just these two products? Looking at Fred and George, Alvin was a little puzzled. In the original book, they had a lot of ghost ideas. Even when Harry was in 5th year, they used all their inventory before escaping from the school, spoofing Umbridge violently. We want more products too, but research requires a lot of money. Hearing Alvin's question, the twins turned pale. Fred explained, we can only slowly accumulate funds, and when the money is enough, we can continue to develop originally. I expected to return some funds from quick-acting truancy sugar this time, George added with a grimace. Are you interested in accepting investments? Looking at Fred and George like this, Alvin suggested, really? The twins' eyes lit up and said in unison, how much do you need? Alvin nodded, not because he pitied the twins, but because he thought the gadgets developed by the Weasley twins were still quite fun. In the end, he also opened a shop in Diagon Alley, although Alvin is not short of money, but this kind of money-making opportunity in front of him is not in vain. George told with flying eyebrows, 50 galleons. No, 30 galleons. With only 30 galleons, we can develop 2 or 3 new products, and the products will definitely sell well. That's enough, is that enough? Alvin said in surprise. Enough is enough, Alvin, you don't know. George and I have only saved 10 galleons this year. 30 galleons is enough for us to buy a lot of raw materials. Alvin did not expect that the twins' experiments would save so much money, knowing that he spent no less than 2,000 galleons to buy materials for practicing alchemy this semester. After thinking about it, Alvin reached into his pocket and took out a small bag. The small bag was held in his hand and made a clanging sound. George and Fred looked at it, their eyes straightened. That's 200 galleons, enough for you to use for a while. Is this really for us? Fred stuttered in surprise. Yes, it's all for you. Don't save, make more products as soon as possible, then we'll go Diagon Alley and open a Weasley joke shop. When the twins heard the end, their eyes lit up and went to Diagon Alley to open their own shop, which was the ultimate dream of the two of them. Alvin looked at the twins who were caught in fantasy and nodded with satisfaction. He had a good relationship with the twins. He knows that the talent of the two is very good. To be precise, the Weasleys are all very talented, oh yes, except for Ron. Help them solve the problem, and then change direction to befriend a pure-blood family, and they can finally make money, which is simply a win-win. Taking the money bag, George pretended to be serious and said, young Master Gaunt, we won't let you down, you can rest assured. Fred also feigned displeasure and patted George. What are you shouting about? What young Master Gaunt, to shout the boss? Alvin laughed dumbly. These two people are making joy all the time. After confirming the profit share of the Alvin 723 with the two, Fred and George rushed back to develop new products. And Alvin also walked to the dormitory, ready to spend the last few days of the semester leisurely. Episode 57. 3 days later, the school auditorium. Today is the year-end banquet and all the young wizards are in the auditorium, enjoying the last dinner of the semester. The entire Great Hall is occupied by Ravenclaw's signature blue, and the eagle logo is scattered all around the Great Hall. The Ravenclaw wizards were as happy as the new year. This year's Ravenclaw finally won the House Cup and also won the Quidditch title. Just yesterday, Ravenclaw managed to limit Harry thanks to Alvin's brilliant play. Cho successfully caught the golden snitch. Throughout the game, whenever Harry moved, Alvin always played a bludger with precision to hinder Harry's movements. After the game, Harry and the twins looked at Alvin with a very resentful look, which made Alvin disgusted enough. It wasn't until Alvin promised to visit the burrow during the summer vacation that the twin brothers let Alvin go. At this time, Alvin sat next to Cho, and the two of them each talked about their plans for summer vacation. Mom and Dad invited you to my house as a guest in the letter. Cho's eyes stared at Alvin, as if she was ready to cry out as long as Alvin didn't agree. No problem, but I can't be sure of the exact time. I have some things to do during the summer vacation. I have to leave London. Alvin has a bit of a numb scalp, 2 lifetimes as a person. Seeing parents is the first time this kind of thing. He was also a little nervous. What do your parents like? Alvin asked tentatively. Cho was also a little funny to see Alvin's nervous look, but he was more happy in his heart. Isn't this what Alvin cares about, his performance? Don't be nervous, Alvin, they're all very talkative people, and you're so good, they'll all like you. Hearing this, Alvin relaxed slightly, but he remembered Hermione again. After the last incident, the relationship between Alvin and Hermione was clear. Since she went to meet Cho's parents, did Hermione have to go there again? If you let the little witch know that she favors one over the other, you will be offended. I couldn't help sighing. It seems that scumbags are not so good. At this moment, Dumbledore walked in, and the noise in the Great Hall gradually subsided. Another year has passed. Dumbledore said cheerfully, "Before you leave school, I have to trouble you to listen to an old man's cliché. Now, as far as I know, we are going to have a House Cup award ceremony, and the specific scores of each house are as follows. 4th place, Gryffindor, 312 points. 3rd place, Hufflepuff, 352 points. 2nd place, Slytherin, 451 points. 1st place, Ravenclaw, 502 points. The Ravenclaw table erupted into thunderous cheers and applause, and even the Hufflepuff and Gryffindor house students cheered for them. Slytherin have won the House Cup for 6 years in a row, and this Ravenclaw victory is a great pleasure. With the exception of the Slytherin accident, the other 3 houses had more or less complaints against them. Alvin saw Snape slashing the steak with his knife and fork, and he could hear the harsh grinding sound. Snape saw Alvin looking at him and glared at him fiercely. Alvin was not annoyed, but returned him a bright smile, which made Snape lose his temper. This Alvin is simply a piece of hobmeat, Snape thought viciously. However, several recent events must also be counted. Dumbledore looked at the Gryffindor table, which made the Ravenclaw young wizard smile a little. Alvin didn't panic at all. If the old bee dared to let Gryffindor surpass Ravenclaw, he would dare to pull out a guy and blow up the school now. As if sensing Alvin's gaze, Dumbledore tilted his head to look at him and smiled slightly. Mr. Ron Weasley, he bravely stood with his partner in the face of danger, for which Gryffindor added 50 points. Miss Hermione Granger, she earned Gryffindor 50 points with her profound knowledge, keen observation, and calm reasoning. Mr. Harry Potter, he has shown senseless courage and extraordinary courage in the face of crisis. I want to add 60 points to Gryffindor. The cheers of the Gryffindors almost tore the enchanted ceiling over. They were so happy, although they did not surpass Ravenclaw, but they had crushed the sworn enemy Slytherin. Dumbledore raised his hand, and the Gryffindors slowly quieted down. Finally, speaking of which, the Ravenclaw wizards were already a little panicked. In case Dumbledore was making some excuse to add a few points to Gryffindor, wouldn't that be the same score as them? Mr. Alvin Gaunt, I have to admit that he is the most brilliant little wizard I have ever seen, and he has defeated a strong enemy with great success. Important Hogwarts possessions were protected. For this I'm going to add 200 points to Ravenclaw. And Ravenclaw managed to break the record and become the highest house score ever received. Boom. The Ravenclaw side went completely crazy, and most of the girls' Ravenclaws erupted into cheers that were no less than the Gryffindors they had just had. A large group of little witches pounced on Alvin like crazy, hugging and kissing him. Cho next to her didn't care at all now, and she also happily threw herself into Alvin's arms. It wasn't until Dumbledore called a halt that the little witches gradually calmed down. Alvin crawled out of the witch pile with difficulty. His robe was almost ripped off, and his face was full of lip prints. Harry looked at the next table with envy. Eventually, in this joyful atmosphere, the banquet was over, and the Ravenclaw wizards escorted Alvin back to his dormitory like escorts. In the end, Alvin almost crawled into the bedroom corridor. This group of women, no, still witch women, is terrible. Episode 58. The next day, Alvin woke up from a nightmare. In the dream, countless Ravenclaw girls threw him one after another. Something unspeakable is happening, over and over again. Autumn and Hermione next to her, smiling at Alvin and the girls. When only Alvin was left alone, they raised their swords in their hands, and then discussed the distribution plan. Until Alvin finished washing, he still had lingering palpitations. Cho's words echoed in his mind. Finally, it's just the two of us. Shuddering, Alvin kept telling himself that it was just a dream. However, let's find some magic to strengthen the body to learn, and in the future, you can also fight hand-to-hand against the Dark Wizard. When Alvin packed up his things, he didn't care how Selves will take them to the car. When Cho and Alvin arrived at the train, both received a letter in their hands. The letter warned them not to use magic during the holidays, and in severe cases, even expulsion. Fred and George said they wished they had forgotten to send this to us. Actually, you don't have to worry. At this time, Alvin spoke, attracting the eyes of the twins and Cho. This notice is essentially a contract magic. As soon as this letter reaches you, you have made an agreement with the Ministry of Magic that he will monitor the use of magic around you. If there are no other wizards next to you, and there are magic fluctuations around you, of course, you are using magic. After Alvin finished speaking, Cho and Fred George fell into deep thought. So you mean that if there are adult wizards around, even if I use magic, they won't be sure that I used it? Fred said uncertainly. That's what you mean. At this time, George suddenly remembered something. Fred, you forgot, the last time we accidentally pushed Ron out of the window, didn't you subconsciously use the floating charm? The Ministry of Magic did not send me a letter that time. The corners of Alvin's mouth twitched when he listened. What a difficult day Ron had. It's really not easy to have such a brother who can still live until now. That's right. George, my mother was at home that day, and she beat us up hard. Having figured this out, the twins suddenly smiled, so that their summer vacation would not be boring. So what do, Alvin? There are no wizards living in your side. Cho looked at Alvin curiously, wondering if he could solve this problem. Oh, when I received this letter earlier, I asked a house elf in the kitchen to sign it for me, so there was no trace on my wand at all. Cho and the twins who listened to these words were dumbfounded, and they didn't expect such a riotous operation. At this time, Alvin stood up. I'll go say hello to Harry. Sit down for a while. Cho didn't doubt that he had him, and nodded to show that he understood. Alvin walked out of the private room and wiped a cold sweat. In fact, he went to find Hermione, and he still thought about how to talk to Cho about Hermione, so he could only use the time management method. Arriving at Hermione's box, the little witch sat in Alvin's arms, chirping about the book she was going to read this summer. The atmosphere between the two is very warm. Alvin listened to Hermione's plan, and his mind was indeed thinking about what he was going to do this summer. If all goes well, he's going to be busy this summer. The first is to complete his own toolman alchemy experiment. He already has a general grasp that as long as he bursts the liver for a few days, he can do it well. The second is to wait for Dumbledore's reply. If Nicole Flamel agrees, he will stay in France for a while. Finally, there are some things that Alvin hesitates in his heart. Although he has a lot of money in his hands, alchemy and ancient magic research are money-burning things. If the money obtained by the system check-in and card draw alone was not enough, he was thinking about whether he needed to recover some wizards to help him earn some wealth. Your own alchemy experiments need to have a place to sell, and some magic items obtained by signing in also need to be disposed of. The train passed through Muggle towns and gradually reached London. Alvin also said goodbye to Hermione in advance, and before taking it away, Alvin gave Hermione a protective pendant. This pendant can automatically release an iron armor spell in a critical moment. He had given Cho the same necklace before, but Hermione's had waited until now. Hermione knew where Alvin was going, pursed her lips, and didn't say anything. After all, she didn't come first. Finally, the train stopped at platform 9 3/4 of King's Cross. It took Alvin a long time for them all to get out of the platform. An old man was there and only allowed 2 or 3 people to pass at a time so as not to attract the attention of the Muggles. After Alvin and Cho passed the platform, they saw a couple waving towards them. The man is an Asian face, and he looks powerful. The woman is a very gentle and beautiful wife. Dad, Mom. Cho ran over with a cheer and plunged into the woman's arms. Seeing this, Alvin was not able to leave, so he had to step forward and say hello. You are Alvin, Cho's eye often mentions you. Cho's father spoke, his eyes still constantly looking at Alvin, as if he wanted to see what was so great about this kid that he could abduct his daughter. Hello Uncle. Alvin nodded stiffly. Feeling Cho's father's unkind eyes, he felt that it was more torturous than another fight with Voldemort. Don't scare the child. Cho's mother slapped Cho's father's head, and in an instant, the cold face turned into a grievance that did not dare to be angry or speak. I'm Cho's mother, just call me Aunt Helen. Alvin instantly knew the status composition of this family, so he pretended to be surprised and spoke. So you're Cho's mother? I wasn't sure just now. You look as young as Cho's sister. Helen Zhang was coaxed by Alvin's words, and immediately became closer to Alvin, and kept inviting Alvin to his home as a guest. Alvin naturally agreed. Finally, after separating from Cho and his parents, Alvin also returned to his own home. Episode 59. Back home, Alvin immediately summoned Fury. Fury was very happy, and Alvin didn't want to attract too much attention at school, so he only let her out every night to play for a while. Now that she is home, she can finally stay outside all day. Alvin then cast a Muggle expulsion spell to prevent outsiders from accidentally spotting Fury. He didn't want to make headlines in the London Daily the next day. Looking at the house that had not been cleaned for nearly a year, it was cleaned up by a whirlwind. Alvin also had to admit that wizards did have the qualifications to look down on Muggles in some matters. For such a large house, if it is cleaned by manpower, it is estimated that it will take 5 or 6 people to clean it for several hours, and wizards only need a few small spells to complete. While Dumbledore did not reply, he decided to make a large space suitcase these days, like Newt Scamander's. When he watched a movie in his previous life, Alvin was very envious of Newt's box, which was like carrying a forbidden forest with him. However, with Alvin's current level, Alvin can't do that level, and Alvin estimates that the box is not Newt's own making. It should be the same thing as the Scamander family's heirloom. Although some of these pure-blood families look poor, their heritage is still not to be underestimated. Like the Weasleys, their clock shows each family member's current position and life status. In the original book, when Mr. Weasley entered St. Mungo's after being attacked, the clock pointed to the hospital. Now Alvin can't figure out what the reason is. Although his current combat effectiveness is not weak, it is only an improvement brought about by the system card draw. If he is now allowed to fight Dumbledore, without using Avalon, although Alvin's spells are very powerful, Dumbledore can play him alive just by applying the magic of the basic charms. Therefore, Alvin never despises any enemy, because you don't know if they will suddenly suffer you with a strange spell and eventually lose your life. Working hard to study more magic and constantly improving himself is what he should do now. Arriving at a vacant guest room, Alvin moved everything out. He decided to use it as his own makeshift laboratory for his own learning of alchemy and alchemy of potions. Early the next morning, Alvin took out an empty suitcase and got ready for work. The first step is to cast a traceless stretch charm on the suitcase. To this end, Alvin drank a bottle of inspiration elixir and a bottle of mana burst elixir just to maximize the effect of his traceless stretching spell. With Alvin's spell casting, the space in the box gradually increased, and Alvin tried his best to finally make the space inside the box become the size of 2 school playgrounds. which was already his limit. If it continues to expand, it may become unstable and will fail in a few months. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, Erwin was ready to start the second step: water and greenery. He first went to Knockturn Alley, bought some fast-growing plants, and planted them in boxes. Then there's the water. Erwin used a large number of transfiguration charms to form a large pit on the ground with an area of 1,000 square meters 5 meters deep. Then I connected a water pipe and filled it with water. This is called a combination of magic and technology. Time in the box changes the same as the outside world. When the outside is day, the inside is also day. When the outside is dark, the inside is also night. So Erwin doesn't have to worry about the light source. With some effort, this small world is basically completed. By the second grade, the environment inside can meet Celestia's survival needs, and Erwin can take her with him at any time. In the end, Erwin put a magic lock on this space, and without his magic drive, the box would only be a normal space to open. Erwin also bought some furniture and daily necessities and put them in the box of small villas he built. When Hermione came to play at Erwin's house, she was stunned by Erwin's magic and imagination when she saw the box. She excitedly entered the suitcase, and then helped Erwin lay out the furniture and decorate the place as a cozy cabin. However, Hermione was also a little worried after her excitement, because it was illegal to cast the traceless stretching charm at will, and she was afraid that Erwin would be targeted by the Ministry of Magic. Erwin didn't care much about this. He had made several space bags. Otherwise, how would there be a place for those connected materials and potions? As long as he doesn't die using these space props in front of those Ministry of Magic officials, presumably no one will come to him for trouble. Episode 60. Erwin, I'm coming. Hermione's voice came from the doorway, and as soon as Erwin reached out, the door opened. Hermione walked in a traditional British sailor suit, a pair of white socks wrapped around her calves, looking exceptionally slender. After changing out of her Hogwarts uniform, Hermione had a little more lively temperament, coupled with specially groomed hair, beautiful like a little princess. Come on, Hermione, it's so hot outside, take a sip of chilled orange juice. At this time, Erwin was sitting in the main seat of the living room, wearing a pair of gold wire glasses and holding a book in his hand. This gives him a little more elegant temperament. Seeing Erwin like this, Hermione's little face turned red again. I feel that Erwin with glasses is also so handsome. What book are you going to read today? Fantastic Beasts Defense Guide, or an alternative application of Transfiguration? For a while, since Hermione found out that Erwin had bought a lot of books, she often came to Erwin's house to read books. After all, there is a limit to the amount of gold galleons that can be exchanged in pounds every year. She couldn't buy all the books she wanted to read. So Erwin's house became Hermione's paradise, and when she was fine, she would come back here to read. Alternative applications of Transfiguration. Looking at the book in Erwin's hand, she didn't even know the font on the cover, only that it was an ancient script. Well, just after you finished reading the book, I have another gift for you. Hermione looked at Erwin curiously, but she was not in a hurry, and took Erwin and handed the book and read it. Soon, the time came to noon, and the two casually went out to eat some food and returned home. Although Erwin has lived alone for so long, he can't cook at all, and Hermione is also a housekeeping idiot, and the two can only go to the restaurant every time. Back home, Erwin took Hermione to a study on the second floor, filled with crucibles and beakers, and 2 cabinets. One was filled with medicinal herbs, while the other contained some metal and other materials. Hermione was also in the room for the first day and looked around. She had not yet been exposed to alchemy, so she did not know many of the materials, and could only barely recognize some potion materials. Erwin set a chair on one side of the experimental table, and he did it to the opposite side. Motioning for Hermione to sit over, Erwin fiddled with a crucible that looked like flowing silver. What is this going to do? Hermione asked Erwin curiously. Although you have a protective pendant, the means of attack are slightly insufficient, and I will help you make up for this shortcoming today. Stirring the crucible and extending his wand to sense, Erwin nodded with satisfaction. He took out a magnifying glass of the kind that Muggle had worn on his head when he repaired his watch, and held a quill in his hand. Reach over. Oh, Hermione nodded obediently and held out her small jade-like hand. It was the first time Erwin looked at Hermione's hand so closely, and she noticed that Hermione's skin was not at all as rough as that of the average Europa, delicate like a piece of silk. Being stared at and playing with Erwin like this, Hermione was a little shy and shook it unconsciously. Don't move around for a while. Erwin saw her like this and instructed. Spreading Hermione's hand out, palm down, Erwin used a quill to dip the alchemical products in the crucible, and then on Hermione's nails, something was constantly drawn. A tingling sensation spread through Hermione's body, making her feel strange. Although Hermione was curious, she didn't dare to disturb when she saw Erwin's very attentive look. I can only endure the slight itching sensation on my nails. After 10 minutes, Erwin breathed a long sigh of relief, finally finished the magic mark on the first nail. Next, he gradually became proficient. After more than an hour, the magic marks on the 10 fingers were all completed. Phew! Erwin took off his glasses and rubbed them to relieve the fatigue caused by long periods of concentration. Hermione finally couldn't help but be curious at this time and asked, Erwin, what the hell is this? Erwin smiled triumphantly. This was a demonstration of his achievements in alchemy and magic this semester. In the future, when you encounter danger, gather the magic power to the fingers of your right hand to activate the spell on the magic pattern. Each spell is automatically replenished after activation, but requires a 12-hour cooldown. The 5 fingers of your right hand have been inscribed with the disarming spell by me, and you can instantly activate the 5 spells together. I call it lightning 5 consecutive whips. Hermione's mouth grew when she heard this. She didn't expect Alvin to have this kind of ability. Just imagine, when Hermione and the others are fighting, the enemy knocks Hermione's wand away with a disarming curse, and then prepares to solve Hermione once and for all. Then Hermione stretched out her right hand and instantly fired 5 disarming spells. The first blow may be the enemy reacting, blocked with an iron armor spell, but what about the remaining few? Thinking of this, Hermione couldn't help but fight a cold war and feel a silence for her enemies in the future. Then what spell is on my left hand? Hermione asked again. This is the flying charm that allows you to summon your wand in an instant, or you can use the flying charm to get your wand back after being hit by an enemy. After Hermione listened, she instantly understood Alvin's train of thought. Watching his little boyfriend prepare self-defense means for himself so hard. Hermione smiled brightly and offered a fragrant kiss as a reward. Alvin accepted it calmly, and during this time, the relationship with the little witch has become more and more intimate, and such a little temptation cannot shake his heart. This method is amazing. Can I learn it? As a top student, Hermione also showed a strong desire for knowledge. This may not work recently, you need to learn ancient magic first, and then you have to learn magic and part of alchemy. Hearing this, the little witch was a little disappointed, but in a blink of an eye, she was full of fighting spirit, and she decided to go to the library next semester and start studying ancient magic. Looking at Hermione's appearance, Alvin shook his head. He knew what Hermione was thinking, but it wasn't something that could be done overnight. Alvin was confident that among the current people in the entire wizarding world, only wizards with no more than double digits could do such a delicate operation. This not only requires a deep understanding of the magic pattern, but also can be simplified to a certain extent, otherwise it is impossible to engrave the complicated magic pattern on the nail. This alone stumped most wizards. In today's wizarding world, fewer and fewer people are willing to study ancient magic. After all, for most wizards, it is enough to use a few commonly used spells. And Alvin refining this special metal is also very difficult. This metal liquid not only needs to have strong magic conductivity, but also needs to be attached to the nail for a long time and cannot fall off. Hermione wanted to do his part, and it would be impossible without 3 or 5 years of hard study. However, Alvin will not stop Hermione. After all, studying these disciplines will also help the little witch's strength grow.